Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Council Cabinet, Derby City Council, on Wednesday, the 12th of April, 4 p.m. We'll crack on straight with the agenda. Apologies I have from Councillor Shanker and Councillor Atwell, but we've got deputies in the form of Councillor Peatfield and Councillor Kerr. Any other apologies? No? Any late items, Karen? No petitions? Item 4 is the identification of urgent items to which calling will not apply. There are none. Declarations of interest, please. Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on the 10th and the 15th of March, I've reviewed, are okay by me. Are they okay with everybody else? Seconder, Councillor Barker. Item 7 is recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board, which sat last night, but put forward no recommendations for us today, so we won't need to refer to them in the course of today's meeting, as there are none. So that takes us straight to item 8, which is Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, an authorisation to bid for funding.
Thanks, Chair. If it's okay, Sean Bennett from Derby Homes. I'm going to take you through this paper very briefly. This paper is seeking authorisation to bid for yet further funding through the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. It's an initiative that's been around now for just over a year. We made a successful bid under Wave 1. The works are underway and almost complete. If anyone's travelling around the Spider Island at Allington and notices the cast irons being transformed, that's the work that we're carrying out to insulate those homes. Much needed work. However, the time constraints with round 1 meant that we needed to package about 2/3 of the properties for a bid under Wave 2. Wave 2 is now open for bidding, and we're seeking authorisation to submit a bid to Wave 2.1 to complete work to a remaining 143 cast iron homes in the Allington part of the city. Then also to be able to accept the bid should we be successful, and I'm fairly confident that we will be, to be able to complete that work over the next 18 months to 2 years. So it's much needed. It's making a massive difference out there for homes that have had the work done, especially through the cost of living crisis. And we plan to complete that work over the next 2 years. And that will get us very, very close to almost all council housing in the city being to at least Band C, well ahead of the government's 2030 target. So we've been really ambitious over the years in terms of insulating and improving the energy efficiency of the stock. And really this is now the tail end of the programme, and it's fantastic if we can bring in some external funding to help complete that work. That's all I've got to say on that matter at the moment. If any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Sean. Just for my benefit, any match funding involved here, or is it a straight grant from government on this one?
We get about a £10,000 grant per property, and we top that up with a further £10,000 from the Housing Capital Programme. So that money is set aside for decarbonisation work already within the Housing Capital Programme. So we use that for match funding. It's frustrating that over the course of the last 18 months, we've seen the costs increase in this area of work as a result of supply and demand. But we've made adequate provision across the next 2 years within the programme to be able to cover off our match funding to make this work happen.
And make these properties good for some time for the future, yeah?
Absolutely. Fit for the next 100 years, hopefully.
Councillor Webb, your portfolio, anything to add?
As you know, I always love to get grant off the government and find useful ways to spend it. This work has been, as Sean said, exceeding our target to bring all Derby Homes properties up to Band C, and I'm really pleased with the work that's been done to do this so far, and I would recommend that we go for this funding bid, as we have got the funding to match it through the capital programme, and it will bring us closer to that target of all properties being Band C or above.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'm sure it's welcomed by local councillors and the government support in the area for these houses and things. So any Are we okay with this? We've got recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Can they be agreed? We agreed, thank you. Item 9 then is the school's capital programme. Expecting that's the mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Great, thank you, Chair. The Chair, the Council has now received notification from the Department for Education for maintenance allocations for community and foundation schools. In order to commence work over the summer for building work, early approval of schemes is necessary. The Council's allocation was 3.1 million, and Appendix 2 of the report sets out the proposed projects and schools where building work is proposed. The areas of work is outlined in 4.4 in the report, and they primarily fall into 5 categories around boiler replacements, structural works, electrical rewiring, roofing, and window replacement works. The details and the information for each project is outlined in the appendix. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions for Gamal? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I had a question yesterday which we didn't have an answer for, and I don't know whether there is an answer today, which is how much preparation was going to be done to enable future improvements. Particularly, I suggested being able to put PVs on the roofs of schools.
Who did you put that question to?
It was at exec scrutiny, and it was Gamal who was speaking there. Whether he's had further information on that, I don't know.
Gamal, do you know, or are you going to get back to Councillor Kerr?
No, Chair, I don't have that information. I'll get back to Councillor Kerr in due course. But just for information, as I outlined yesterday, these are old schools with older buildings and roofs, and therefore these are kind of maintenance works to some of these roofs, and therefore the structural integrity of the roof may not necessarily cope with additional weight, and that's where the technical assessment would need to be done. But I will check, colleagues. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. 3.1 million, Gamal, I'm just wondering, is that the same amount that was allocated as last year? And how much is actually needed? I'm presuming that the works that are allocated are those that are the most in need. But in terms of all of the works and all of the jobs that need to be done across all of the schools, how much is that total?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the actual 3.1 million is very similar to last year's allocation. And Chair, the report, I think, does indicate a condition backlog of about 15 million plus across schools. So, I mean, there are various categorisations of condition surveys, but Chair, the funding is not sufficient in terms of the level of condition need over a number of years within schools.
But it's obviously in addition to new school building programmes, yeah. Which is, remind me, can you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah, Chair, you're absolutely right. So in terms of the National Rebuilding Programme, there are at least 5 schools that have been prioritised for complete rebuild and replacement, and that is really, really good news, because that will obviously take a significant proportion of the outstanding condition work kind of away, and those schools, Chair, have been prioritised in the context of having severe building condition needs.
Multi-million-pound investment by government. Councillor Webb, anything to add? Oh, it might be Councillor Williams even. Well, he normally has something to add, but I was...
No, thank you, Chair. And as you've just alluded to, I have to say that Gamal and his team are absolutely fantastic at applying for the funds and the bids for increasing the capital programme in schools, whether it was from the BSF, the Priority Schools Building, or indeed this latest round. They've always done really, really well in getting some grand results there from the government, whichever government it may be. But in terms of this report, no, it's a report that comes out each year, and I'm happy with those recommendations, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And those recommendations are 2.1 to 2.4. Can they be agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. Item 10 Is the SEN High Needs Transformation Programme? Email. Everyone's going to do it. Okay, thank you.
Just logged me out at the wrong time. Apologies. Yes, it's like the two Ronnies. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. So this is a report to introduce what we're calling the Special Educational Needs Placement Sufficiency Strategy, which in plain English is looking at how many places we'll need based on the current data that tells us about the trends and needs of children with special needs in the city, and how many new places we need to build in Derby to make sure those children are educated in Derby as close to home as possible. And one of the most important elements of that is to maintain those places in Derby, as currently we are spending far too much on out-of-area placements so that children are going beyond the city boundaries into both maintained and independent specialist settings, which puts great pressure on the revenue budget. Additionally, we know that the transport costs which are borne by the council for out-of-area distant placements are problematic, and we're working very hard to manage that situation, and this makes a major contribution to that too. So the strategy and data which you've been presented with really informs the Send Capital strategy. So where do we need to build those places? Where is it best to build those places? And to really do lots of things really in terms of maximising the space that we already have in schools, both in primary and in secondary. There are reasons for that, to give better value for money and to also include children and young people in their local school, which I think is, and community, which is really, really important. So one of the key aspects of this is that within the recommendations is to further expand the previously approved hub and spoke model and extend it from 30 places a year to 64 places a year for the following 5 years. This is based on the data and intelligence that we have and knowing the space that's likely to come up in schools. We have begun to talk to individual schools now about pairing those schools together. So many of you will know that this is where a special school expands its places into a mainstream school where the physical space is available, and that the funding is used to adapt the mainstream school so that those children, young people, can be included, but they remain on roll at the special school. They have the opportunity then to have their specialist teaching and learning, their therapies and additional support as needed, but they may join some lessons within the mainstream school as identified individually, join in with social and social events, etc. So there is a real, inclusive practice at the heart of this, which is essentially, I feel, the most important element of it. So I'm asking for your approval on this, and so that we can actually drive the capital programme forward with the information contained here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Any comments, questions? Councillor Williams, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that, the SEND arena is very complex, and working with the local area on these programmes, transformation programmes, has been very challenging but also very rewarding, and we're in a much different place than we were 5 years ago. I think this is the right strategy. We've worked really closely with other local authorities that have developed this strategy, and they are seeing improvements. So I hope that Cabinet can support this in the next step, and we'll continue to make sure that all of our strategies are developed using the right intelligence and data to make sure that we've got those places where we can, locally and in partnership with mainstream schools and our special schools. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kerr?
Thank you. I absolutely support the aims of having children educated closer to home, but as it says in 4.3 paragraph 2, this change will need to be planned carefully with school leaders to ensure everything goes well. And I feel that we've not really moved to first stage 1 of this in the Spoken Hub process, and we're expanding it already. And there's still this learning, very much this learning being referred to in the paper. And I'd just like a bit more reassurance that we have the right training in place and the right skills in place, both within the community schools and with the outreach from the changing roles of the special schools to be able to make all this work.
Pauline or... Yeah, Pauline,
Thank
there
you.
are examples
Thank you.
where we're further on with this than...
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. And I think, very relevant question. There are other places, numerous places across the country who, as we talk further, have demonstrated that this is a good model for all the reasons already set out within here. No, we haven't proven it in Derby, but the opportunity can't be missed. We need to expand those places as quickly as possible. And the other option is to build new places which are very high cost. We then miss an opportunity, I believe, to include those children in the mainstream setting. For example, you may have a gifted mathematician or sports person who is perhaps not being given the opportunity in their current environment, but actually could thrive better in that mainstream environment. So these discussions have been had. Not everybody in this room has been party to them, but many of us have. And there is great enthusiasm and will to do this. And I honestly think that, if I were to invent schooling again, I wouldn't invent separate special schools. I would invent hubs, because, we do not want to create a place where children are separated from each other and then we try to make a harmonious community and society later. So Chelsea and Kensington, I've spoken to in the last couple of weeks, Westminster, and of course our own model is based on the Shropshire model, where one of the lead head teachers in Derby at St Martin's led the programme 10 years ago in Shropshire. So we do have quite a lot of information. No, we don't have the examples of this, but actually you could say it deepens and builds on the enhanced resource model and takes that even further, which we do already have in the city and is already proven. So hopefully that will help.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, if I can also give you some assurances that all of the heads from our special schools are on board with this, and Pauline and her team have worked really closely with them to make sure that they understand their role in moving forward. They're really excited to do this, and they will ensure that the mainstream schools have the training that they're required in order to understand some of the complexities that the young people that they will be having in the hubs have, and that they are the professionals, they are the most skilled people in Derby that we have as head teachers of our special schools. So if I can give you those assurances there, they are fully on board with this and are really, really excited by this prospect.
Councillor Kerr, you want to come back briefly?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to know what oversight and ongoing review of how things are going that there is going to be over the next, the next term, 2 terms, 2 years, just to sort of monitor what's going on and to make any adjustments that are necessary.
Yeah, Chair, well, we do have the SEND Strategic Board. We have currently just recruited a new independent chair for that. And they will have oversight of that, as well as our own scrutiny boards who may or may not wish to have a look at this in the future. The Cabinet member will always have Cabinet member briefings on this, and they have their own Cabinet member meetings. They should be monthly, and they are able to hold their own surgeries on that as well, as are scrutiny. So we know that there's enough scrutiny around within the system to make sure that this is kept an eye on. There will also be scrutiny from the Schools Forum, and then of course we have the DSG and plans there for moving forward for that deficit model.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to sum up or no? Okay. We've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Can they be agreed? Thank you. Item 11 then. Development of Bonsall Avenue and Repton Avenue, formerly known as Warwick House.
Myself, Chair, thank you. So this report actually proposes the redevelopment of the former Warwick House care home on Bonsall Avenue. The property was actually decommissioned and closed as a care home and has subsequently been demolished. We have had a feasibility design carried out, which indicated that we could successfully develop it for delivery of 22 new affordable homes. The actual scheme can actually be funded through the HRA capital programme and utilising the right to buy receipts. So we do seek the recommendations for the delegation to actually take this scheme forward. Obviously there is, as we know, there is a huge demand for affordable housing within the city. The property mix is a mix of 1-bed, 2-bed and 4-bed houses, which reflects the greatest need at the moment. And the properties would be owned by the city and managed on behalf of us by Derby Homes, and they would be let through Home Finder. We have got an outline timescale from seeking Cabinet approval through to the end of the defects liability period, which would be targeting in March 2026. But the properties themselves would actually become available in 2025. We have actually consulted with Derby Homes, and we have also consulted with the ward councillors in that area. So I'm happy to take any questions.
And 4 business cases will go to the PMO before any
Yes, they will.
signed and done and delivered.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that this is part of over 500 affordable homes that have been supplied to the city during my tenure as Cabinet member. So whether that be in partnership with housing associations or Derby Homes, that's the total number so far. These will just add to that. And as we are developing homes that are fit for purpose and meet our environmental credentials and taking up brownfield sites, I would recommend this to Cabinet to move forward as swiftly as possible.
Thank you very much. I note it's on Repton Avenue. Is any councillors claiming any direct involvement in this or credit for it or anything? No? Maybe not. Okay. Recommendations 2.1 to 2.5 then. Can they be agreed? Agreed. Item 12 then, redevelopment of the Knoll Village.
That's myself again. So this report actually proposes the redevelopment of the Knoll on Village Street, which is a long-term vacant site. It's quite secluded and you don't necessarily know that the site is there. Again, it can be contained within the capital programme and through the use of right to buy receipts. Again, we will actually go to PMO before we proceed with it. This would be actually 18 houses, again, a mix of 1, 2 and 4 beds, but we do have a couple of 3-bed properties on this site as well. Again, it reflects the need, the property types in the city. Our outline programme is very similar to the previous report, where these would come on board slightly later, so they would be practically complete in June 2025. Again, we have actually discussed and had engagement with Derby Homes, and we have notified the ward councillors as well for this. On this site, we have actually submitted a bid, or looked to submit a bid for the Brownfield Land Release Fund to see if we can actually secure some external funding, which would actually help with some of the initialisation works, and that has gone through for 320,000. So that would actually bring in more money into this scheme and help improve the viability. So happy to take any questions.
The brownfield funding is a bid at the moment, not firmed.
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Peterfield.
Thank you, Chair. Just on 4.2, when it says the site is surrounded by mature trees, are those trees, do they have TPOs on them, and what guarantees can we have that as much greenery and tree cover will be protected as possible? Thank you.
We've actually had a full tree survey carried out, and we are minimising any loss of trees. We're also doing substantial ecological enhancements as part of the scheme. We do have an open area, and that will have additional enhancements as for offsetting for any loss. But generally, there is minimal loss of trees on site. All of the perimeter trees are being retained. They will not go into the actual gardens of the properties, so that they can actually be properly maintained and looked after. None of them do actually have TPOs on them at the moment, but it is one of the things that we obviously do take into account when we're looking to design, especially with climate change.
And of course that will be dealt with as part of the planning process anyway, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Good. Any other comments, questions? Because we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Can they be agreed? That's agreed. Item 13 then is the compulsory acquisition of empty homes.
I'm up again.
There you go, hat trick.
So this report asks Cabinet for us to approve to look to proceed to start CPO enforcement action on 4 long-term vacant properties. We have had ongoing complaints about the properties. There are council tax arrears on them. We have found historically that where we are approved to undertake action, probably only about 50% of the time that actually does end up in the enforcement proceeding to court. It normally is enough of a stimulus for the owners to actually implement changes and bring those properties back into use. The actual addresses are within the confidential version of the report. So really it is just to ask Cabinet to approve for us to proceed for the CPOs of these 4 identified properties.
So a lot of good work going on in this field. We seem to have one or two every council meetings, cabinet meetings. So thank you for that and being very productive. Any comments, questions? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. And again, the team in strategic housing have done a fantastic job over the last 5 years. 300 empty homes brought back into use throughout the city. As Karen has said, when this is the last resort when it comes to compulsory purchase, we usually work with the owners of the properties and can come to arrangements to purchase properties at market value before it comes to CPO. So CPO's the last resort, and again, as Karen has said, 50% of these usually end up being worked on by the owners to bring them back into use, but we will take any empty properties that are causing issues and bring them back into use as quickly as possible. So again, recommend the Cabinet to accept these proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. If there's no other comments, questions, it's recommendations 2.1 and details in 2.2 as well. So can they be agreed? Seems to be agreed. Thank you. 14 then is not Karen, it's Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this regular report complies with contract and financial procedure rules. There's one item on the report for this month, and that's in relation to some funding that we are holding in our D2 business rate pilot reserve, which in 2018 we were awarded 350,000 towards the development of a make and trade zone concept for the city centre. And in 2019, we commissioned a feasibility study of £50,000 into the makeup of that scheme. So the project team have been working with our key partner, Marketing Derby, and now have developed a delivery model. And there's two strands of activity proposed within the report. The first strand is in relation to a £100,000 pot for grants to landlords and property owners for refurbishment costs associated with converting city centre property into units where creative industry and maker businesses can operate. And it's proposed that the grant support would be to a maximum of 25% of the costs, or £50,000 per project, which is ever the greater. And the second strand is the £170,000 pot, and that's grants to the creative and maker businesses themselves to support the fit out and refurbishment costs of those city centre properties. And there's a cap on that grant of £10,000. There's also a sum of the balance of the funds will be of 30,000 will be retained for the administration costs supporting the operation of the project. So the recommendations in the report are to approve the use of the 300,000 business rate pilot reserve to create a grant scheme, and the appropriate delegations within the report to allocate those grants.
Thank you, Alison. Important funding for one of a number of initiatives we have to do to regenerate our city centre. Any comments, questions? Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Chair. Just really seeking to clarify when you says within the city centre. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, 300,000 doesn't go a massively long way, although obviously every penny counts. Will that be focused into a specific area? Will it be visible areas, for example, so that we can ensure that when we decide where that allocation is going, that the public can visibly see that a difference has been made? Just as an example, as opposed to there's lots of city centre within the inner ring road and something on a side street that doesn't have high footfall, for example, will benefit, but the public isn't going to necessarily see that response.
I'm sure they'll all be dealt with on their merits, but Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Absolutely, the priority around using this funding is to try and animate our city centre. It's one of those strands of work we are introducing, both the short-term and the longer-term things that make a difference to regeneration of the city centre. So making sure that the profile and the impact of this funding is seen and therefore witnessed and supports that growing in confidence is really important. So it will be by case, but it's a really important consideration, absolutely.
Okay, so recommendations are 2.1, 2.3. Can they be agreed? Agreed. Item 15 then is Rough Sleepers Initiative, another application for targeted funding, and we've had considerable success along this way in the past. I don't know who's going to, yeah, welcome back.
So this report actually seeks approval for a funding bid. This is an expansion of the Rough Sleepers initiative, and we have successfully obtained funding previously over a 3-year period. We're 1 year into that period. Derby has now been identified as an area that can apply for additional funding over the next 2 years. So there would be an overlap between the funding we already have and this funding bid. The opportunity or the bid application date is fast looming, so we would be looking to submit the bid, and it would be up to a maximum of 450,000. It would actually allow us to continue to work with our vulnerable citizens and to give them potentially the best outcomes possible. I think it's also worth noting that the grant arrangements would actually go over, and the grant award would be transferred over to Derby Homes, who actually manage our homelessness service, and they would be responsible to deliver the scheme in line with the grant conditions. And it would therefore be Derby Homes who would actually bear any financial risks of cost in excess of the grant award or any breach of the grant terms. Sorry.
Any questions? Comments? Well, good luck with this one. Say some more. Roy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And again, a real success story in partnership with social housing providers, East Midlands Ambulance Service, the Mental Health Trust, NHS colleagues, police and probation, working with some of our most vulnerable homeless people. Again, during my tenure, rough sleepers on the streets have come down from 37 down to 6, and that is a success story in itself. And then add to that the work that we're trying to bid for here to be able to consolidate the work that our teams are doing across the city to reduce and even eliminate rough sleeping. We've had a real challenge in this, and the teams, all of them, have worked hard to do this. It's worth looking at the report that goes with this Cabinet report and all the partnerships that are involved, detailed on pages 17, 18 and 19. It really is a success story, and I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say there is nobody sleeping rough in this city that hasn't been offered accommodation at least once. So I would recommend support for this bid so that we can totally eliminate rough sleeping in this city.
Thank you, Roy. Yeah, absolutely a great success, but it's probably one of the best examples of how partnership working across the city can benefit our residents of all nature, those that sleep rough or whatever. So congratulations to all those involved, and hopefully this will help to continue that programme and make it a continued success. So congratulations on that. Before I move to item 16, the exclusion of the press and public, this is the last Cabinet meeting of this municipal year. I know it's fair to say that it's been a remarkable year, a very challenging year. We've brought some remarkable things to the council through Cabinet decisions, not least with the work of the officers that have been dedicated. And to be honest, a Cabinet meeting with 19 items on at this time of year when sometimes the business of council gets interfered with. It's a credit to the officers that we can still deal with significant items in relation to the business of the council. But it's also an opportunity for me as leader of the council to thank my cabinet and the officers and the members that are involved in my cabinet, because you've all made it my job extremely easy this year compared to how it could have been, because of your dedication and remarkable skills in relation to dealing with your portfolios. And that's everybody. But I have to say there are 3 members of my cabinet who I will have difficulty in replacing next year when I come to redo my cabinet. They have been decades of work involved with the council, experience and knowledge and dedication second to none. So from me as leader, thank you for that. Wish you well in your future retirements or whatever it is you go on to do, Yvonne. And just a big thank you on behalf of the members of the public in Derby for your efforts over the last 12 months, but for months and years before that. So in relation to Councillor Williams, Councillor Webb and Councillor Barker, a big thank you. And okay. I'm reminded that I need to finish off the recommendations for item 15 and get those agreed, which are 2.1 and 2.2. Thank you. So that does lead me to item 16, which I have to propose that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed?